Hello, everyone, and thanks for giving us your time today for VR Download. In case you're new here, each week we meet in virtual reality using the latest technologies to discuss the next generation of personal computing. My name is Ian Hamilton, and I'm in the United States, joined by my colleague David Heaney from Northern Ireland. VR brings us together into this broadcast studio where we've got multiple automatic cameras, a TV to show images and videos, and we can see live comments from YouTube on our tablets. We syndicate VR download out to all podcast platforms and encourage our audience to become members and subscribe to our work. Heaney, what do we have today?
Today we're going to talk about D-Link's Wi-Fi dongle for Quest wireless PC VR being officially announced, priced at $99. We're going to talk about SideQuest raising $12 million from Google's venture arm, Sony's production schedule and demand expectation for PlayStation VR 2, according to Bloomberg, Lenovo's ThinkReality VRX mixed reality headset that they announced, and finally, the apparent leak of Quest 3's design and key features, the first substantive leak that there's been really of Quest 3.
Thank you to our existing members. We've got Captain Clutch, Adam Hartzell, King Jellyfish. We've got also a new member today that just joined up, Pawowski. Thank you so much. We've also got Artful, Paradise Decay. We've got Guy Godin, the creator of Virtual Desktop, in our audience. It's a very interesting person to have in our audience today as we discuss the Air Bridge. And yes, thank you all for tuning in. We have a huge week coming up and a huge month.
You just muted yourself.
My finger went through the menu there. Yeah, we've got a huge period of time coming up in VR history here, and it's just sort of building right in front of us. But let's get right into that first subject here with D-Link's Wi-Fi dongle for Quest. So we were both talking about this early this morning. This has been building for a while. Why don't you recap what we know about this device and some of the questions we have?
So it leaked many months ago. It was spotted in the Quest Link or Rift PC VR drivers. So this is something we've known about coming for a long while. The pitch of this product is essentially that if you're using virtual desktop or Airlink on a suboptimal network where either your router is too far away, going through too many walls, or there are too many other devices on your network, this is a dedicated solution that will create a point-to-point Wi-Fi connection between your PC and the headset, meaning there's no congestion from other devices, and you don't have to worry about the signal distance or going through walls. It's $99. That was what was announced today, in that it is now out. And we hope to get a unit to review how it works in the real world.
Yeah, we've obviously got a very large number of solutions out there. I was recapping it and going back over the history there, and I was surprised to see, I guess surprised and not surprised at the same time, that Meta still sells their original $79 5 meter long Oculus Link cable. So this thing came out, it's a very thin cable, so it's very small, low profile, but obviously people were kind of flabbergasted at the price of this USB cord basically to connect your headset. And for a while there, Meta didn't seem like they were going to support a wireless option. And we had options like Virtual Desktop, like I said, Guy Godin in our comments there, who kind of proved in a lot of ways that this could be a good experience over wireless for a very large number of people. But there's some problems there, right? If you have a congested Wi Fi network, and if you have walls in the way, you might have a pretty bad experience with wireless PCVR. Kini, when you connect to PCVR with your Quest, how do you do it?
Yeah, so I'm connecting to a dedicated Wi-Fi 6 router that is itself connected via Ethernet to my original router. And obviously, it's also connected via Ethernet to my PC. And I'm using Virtual Desktop personally. And, I'd point out that it's not just that Virtual Desktop proved that this was possible. Initially, as you reported on yourself, Ian, at the time, Virtual Desktop was blocked by Facebook from releasing that feature in the Quest store. And it was only allowed a few months before Facebook's own Airlink feature dropped. So, that's an interesting kind of decision there. For a lot of people, if you are very technical and you can set up a optimal virtual desktop setup with a high end router, this is not going to do you any good. There's no real point in you getting this. As you say, this is for your average person who has an ISP supplied router, 3 rooms down the hallway. And when they try to use virtual desktop or Airlink, it's just a stuttery mess. And, either because of their living situation or their level of technical expertise, they don't want to set up a dedicated router. They just want something that they can plug into their computer and play Steam VR games with no real hassle. Now, obviously, the caveat is that we haven't received this yet, so maybe there is some sort of design flaw or hassle. But the assumption is that the pitch of this product is to make that entire process a lot simpler and more guaranteed.
We have another new member here, Quentin Mahoney. Thank you so much for becoming a member and supporting our work. And I see Sexy Sexy Bicycle out there as well as another member. Good morning to everyone. Let's see. Guy is saying AirBridge at $100 is a ripoff, in my opinion. A dedicated router. I'm saying router because you say router. It's router in America. Has better signal strength and is much cheaper at $40 to $50. Uh, I wonder if that's true for everyone, Guy. Like, I know you don't really track inside your app. You don't have any tracking software inside your app, but you obviously do have a lot of support issues to handle on an ongoing basis. I'm curious what you've learned from some of those support people coming to you with various issues in virtual desktop. Like, what is the predominant way people connect, and what's the biggest hang up in those connections?
Yeah, the other thing I'd say is, as much as I respect you, Guy, and as much as I think your product's incredible, and I personally use it on an almost daily basis, there is obviously a bias issue here in that this product, as far as we know, only does work with Airlink, and your product is working with routers. So yes, for if you're technical, a person who knows how to set up, a custom router setup, virtual desktop is very likely going to provide you a much higher quality connection than anything that is
Well,
going to come first party.
okay.
But that's not everyone.
Okay, well, that's okay. Well, all right. So to play devil's advocate there a little bit, uh, adding another piece of hardware to your PC setup is scary to me, right? Like, I've having gone through the wireless unit that you connect to an original Vive, right? I had to open up my PC, stick a card in there, attach it to the motherboard, and then have a wired device coming out and mounted into a nice location facing my VR space. I used it as much as I could, but it was still a nightmare, right? All of this thing. And just all of Heaney, even in this studio, we used to run this studio on PC headsets. You went through the effort of making it so it supported a Valve Index. But like the microphone going weird, USBs not connecting, anything that connects to a PC, you're dealing with a just a monstrous number of things that can go wrong. And attaching another little USB device to this is it scares me in thinking about the idea that Meta hasn't really supported their PC user base in a very long time. By all indications, they've moved on from PC support. So, like, if this thing breaks on you, that's are you going to get a bug fix out of Meta? Are they going to update the software? Because that's a big thing in my mind.
Well, I don't think you can really conflate putting a PCIe card into your PC with plugging in something via USB. And I think one of the things that no one's really commented here, but the fact that Meta is working with D-Link to release this product in 2022 clearly indicates that Meta isn't done with PC VR yet. It would be a very strange thing to release a product like this if Meta intended to be fully done with PC VR. We know that presumably, again, based on the manual and the screenshots, this integrates with the Rift software, the software you use to connect your Quest to your PC. So, and from what Carmack's indicated in the past, this is running firmware that was at least helped, if not written by Meta itself. So I really wonder how this does tie into Meta's future strategy. We're seeing some of our competitors here talk about the rumors and the leaks of Meta working on a cloud VR service. That could be something that ties into this in the sense that Meta may want to guarantee that you're getting a signal coming directly from an Ethernet source rather than going through an ISP supplied router. But that is a very sort of open question. Is Meta's future for high end PC VR going to be purely through the cloud, or is there still a route for owning your own gaming PC and using something like this?
Well, yeah, that was, I think I was reading the comments when you were speaking, so I might have missed you saying this, but there is that argument that this is Meta controlling the last mile, so to speak, or the last few feet of your wireless connection in order to ensure some kind of quality of experience all the way out to the cloud. But to Guy's comment here saying that indications are that it only works with Airlink, he's also saying that haven't tried it, but a router will theoretically have better signal strength because it's not powered by USB. Uh, yeah, I mean, I do think there's an argument to be made. I went back and forth with this with uh, Guy a little bit, trying to understand what would be the ideal router because that has been kind of the fantasy in the back of my head that you go and get a dedicated device that only handles VR traffic, and a router that only handles VR traffic made sense. But now this is only $100 and you just plug it into your computer and go. But, I guess I'm just want to throw it out there that people have had nightmares with Oculus Link and Airlink at various times over the last couple of years, and it has gone on for weeks for some people. And I would just hate to see people go and get this and then get left with an unsupported product in about 6 months. But we'll have to see how that goes, I suppose.
Yeah, I think there's not much more we can say about this until we try it. On that note, I would just obviously, as we always say to commenters, don't pre order hardware if you're not ready for it to not work. Always wait for reviews for something that's novel and highly technical like this, just in case it doesn't. I am very, very curious to see how close this does get to delivering that ideal, it just works wireless PCVR experience that we've all wanted for so long. It hasn't been there since the Vive. Have you noticed? Have you noted? You had to put it into your PC, you had to mount it on the wall. It hasn't been there with Airlink or Virtual Desktop because, there's always been that issue of your router and your setup. Is this going to be that solution? Maybe, maybe not. We'll find out when we get one, which should be soon, hopefully.
Yeah, Quentin saying I can't see Meta going in for cloud gaming until they have more guarantee of quality. I'd agree with that because that has been their way of operating so far, except that it is something they kind of want to be on the leading edge of testing. And if they control edge servers very close to your home in perhaps big cities or test markets, I could see them having a very long multi-year testing plan there for getting cloud gaming up and running. But it's obviously going to be a very long path for them. Are we ready to move on, or are there any comments that you want to respond to, Heaney?
I think we can move on to talk about SideQuest raising that money.
Yeah, so SideQuest yesterday just announced that they've raised $12 million from Google Ventures. Now, that's a modest amount of money compared to the likes of Rec Room and companies like that. And it's obviously a completely different product than anything else in the VR space at this point. But I think it's really, really interesting. The reason I wanted to talk about it is there was a blog post put out there by MG Siegler. He is a former TechCrunch writer who has moved on to investing and invests for Google. And this investment comes from Google Ventures. Now, I think Google Ventures has had some weird investments in the past, and they have not invested in VR in a very long time. That's what that blog post from Siegler kind of points out. The blog post even says back to virtual reality as kind of a joke on the theme. Um, and yeah, Guy in the comments bringing up that just the same week Stadia shut down. So Google's streaming game service shut down at the same time that the ventures arm is making this investment in SideQuest. The reason this is so important for those of you who aren't aware, most of our viewers will probably be aware of this, but the underlying system software that runs basically all standalone VR headsets is Android. You've got Android layered, buried underneath there, and then of course Android is backed by Google. So it's this investment is a very interestingly strategic move from Google to bolster one of the companies that's kind of putting Meta to task on how open their ecosystem is. Yeah, Guy Godin in our comments, right? Virtual desktop enabled PCVR in a large part very early using SideQuest as its deployment platform for getting that software out to quite a lot of users before Meta really felt comfortable with it. Heaney, do you see this as a significant investment? And what do you think SideQuest is going to do with that money?
It's really hard to know. We haven't really heard anything about Google's general VR strategy. Obviously, this comes not from Google proper, but from its venture capital investment arm. So it's possible that this investment isn't to do with anything to do with Google's larger strategy, but just that they think that what SideQuest is doing has the potential to be successful. Because as you say, all of these standalone headsets, be they coming from Meta or Pico or HTC, are running this same Android operating system underneath that can have APKs sideloaded. We've seen SideQuest act as a storefront on the headset itself now. It's not just something you have to connect to your PC anymore. And so there is this potential that it becomes this kind of universal third party market that delivers the experiences that the larger platform holders aren't willing to risk having on their store. And that, if VR does explode in popularity in the next few years, as we're all expecting, that is a large potential market.
Yeah, I think a lot about the VR mods that are so popular right now. We've got Half-Life 2 over on Steam doing incredible numbers. I think it's got an overwhelmingly positive rating for that mod of the original Half-Life 2 game to play the whole game in VR on a PC VR headset. But there have been a lot of modders out there, Team Beef and his associates out there working to bring a lot of classic PC VR games into standalone VR. Return to Castle Wolfenstein, I think Doom 3, the original Doom. Those are wildly impressive experiences to be able to have on a standalone headset. It makes you feel like the headset is a PC in a much more robust way when you can have that kind of classic experience in VR. And I think about that next phase of this, right, where you can't officially carry some of these things on an official store. And uh, modders and fans might be willing to do some of this stuff for free and put it out in an unofficial way until they receive, a DMCA notice, Digital Millennium Copyright Act, DMCA, till they get a notice to take it down, right? And so there's a lot of stuff that's sitting on SideQuest that, it's really, really a major reason to use it, but you've got the mods over there supported on Steam. And I think there's a really interesting thing to think about in this next phase of computing of just which place ends up being the place where you end up getting modded PCVR content. Yeah, and $12 million, that's gonna last. Every company that gets an investment round, they say it's supposed to last about 18 months. SideQuest in the year or so since they raised a couple million. So the company has raised, I think, just over 15 million total so far. In the year since they raised the last 3 million, they launched the app that lets you actually load up SideQuest within a headset, but it doesn't have necessarily all of those features that people have depended on using the PC to get stuff in. But I will be curious to see how smooth and slick they can make that in headset process over the next little bit. We ready to move on, Heaney, or do you see any comments you want to respond to?
Yeah, I think we can talk now about Sony.
Yeah, so Sony has revealed, reporters have revealed Sony's production schedule with demand for the PSVR 2 being charted out a little bit. Heaney, what do we make from these latest numbers that have been reported?
Yeah, so Bloomberg is reporting that Sony expects to have 2 million units produced by around the time of the launch, and that launch is slated for early 2023. But more interestingly than that production figure, which is what most people looked at when they saw this news, is that they claim to have a source saying that Sony anticipates much greater popularity for the PlayStation VR 2 versus the original. And they say that they expect the launch to coincide with the expected relief of the supply chain bottlenecks, such that the PlayStation 5 will be readily available once this launches. If these sources are correct, that's going to be fascinating because you're going to be able to not be stuck in that situation where, oh, I want a headset, but maybe the headset's not in stock or the console's not in stock. You have to wait for two devices to be in stock. If Sony can get out of that, and that the demand really is what they're expecting, significantly higher, and they're shipping millions of this. This is going to be the new frontier for high-end VR in a way that we haven't had since the launch of the original PC headsets in 2016.
Yeah, I'm saw what was it, Artful talking about links and how, we were talking just you and I about the issues facing production, just hitting everyone down, just everyone all the way on down. And it's been just a nightmare to think about the fact that this year was supposed to be a big year for VR, and we've only got, by all indications, one really major new headset making it out to market in this calendar year. But we've got a lot to look forward to next year, and it's going to be a competition in an entirely new way, right? Across all these different platforms. You've got wired, you've got wireless, and then you've got standalone where it doesn't even need anything external. And prices all over the board from, the hundreds of dollars up as far as we can tell into the thousands. Uh, I wonder if we're ever going to have a time like this again in the history of VR going forward, Heaney, where once these companies kind of see each other's hands and what products they came up with, I would expect to see much less differentiation between them going forward, right? These headsets, I imagine, would start to look a lot like each other over time. Um, but, Sony had to work so many years to get to where it did, Heaney. How big of a headset, how many devices do you think we'll see on the market next year for PlayStation VR compared to the 10 million plus that we think are out there for Quest 2?
Yeah, as one of our commenters, Jimmy there is pointing out, the estimates for Quest 2 now is 17 million. So if 2 million of this are ready for launch, it's still not quite in the realm of Quest 2. But you kind of said there that there's going to be so many headsets competing next year. And that's true in one way. But I don't think that all of this is competition. The VR market is so small right now that I think a lot of this is going to be growing out into entirely new areas of people who have never owned a VR headset before. This doesn't really directly compete with Quest 2 or Pico 4, in my view. This is bringing a new kind of VR, a much more gaming focused, a much more immersive, high end focused to people who are PlayStation 5 owners. This is not, I don't anticipate there's going to be many people that go out and buy a PlayStation 5 just for this, at least not at first, not in the first launch cycle of this headset. But for those console gamers that do own a PS5, they're going to get one anyway. This is going to be a much more appealing option than picking a Quest 2 or Pico 4, because a lot of those people are used to and expect a much higher graphical fidelity and scope of games than any of the standalone headsets can currently offer.
Yeah, Birdie suggesting that this probably targets a younger audience. That's an interesting thing to think about with where PS5 is, most popular in any given age group. But I I'm wondering if you take away the external tracker and you make this a simpler setup, right? We're, we just spent the first section of this talking about all the problems you have on PC, right? All the USB system update notifications that can make your day a headache on PC. Not a lot of that is going to exist on PS5. You plug this thing in and it should go way more often than we're used to even on PCVR headsets, right? It was a long evolution, a multi-year evolution for Facebook to go from the Rift with all those USB devices to just the Rift S, where you plug in the thing and you don't have any external sensors and you're ready to go. You're going to have that and even a smoother experience here out of PS5. I'm and you go back to the estimates, the crazy estimates of how many Quest 2s are sold. How many of those Quest 2s are in closets and not being used compared to this thing that is going to sit right next to your home entertainment center always and be ready to go at a moment's notice. I do wonder what retention is going to be like on this device compared to Quest. It could be surprising that this thing is used more often than people are expecting compared to even the original.
Yeah, it will be fascinating to see retention because that is the pitch you get here. You get the simplicity of standalone, but with the graphical fidelity of PC. Of course, there are the disadvantages. You have the same wire as the majority of PC, and you have the lockdown nature of a console in that you can't get the kind of mods that we were just talking about earlier on something like this. You can't go and kind of sideload content in the way that you even can on standalone headsets. Standalone headsets, despite all the talk of meta locking down things, you can still go and sideload whatever APK you want on a Quest or a Pico. Whereas on something like this, you're stuck to Sony's experience. But on the retention of Quest 2, I do think some people are a bit over pessimistic about that. From that statistic I always bring up in Rec Room, there are something like 3 million monthly active Rec Room users that are Quest 2 users alone. So even if there are something like 10 to 15 million Quest 2s out there, a lot of those people are using Rec Room every single month. And the fact that you can pick it up and wirelessly use it anywhere in your home is maybe just as much of a pitch as the ability to use this, because yes, you have it beside your entertainment center, but you only have it beside your entertainment center. This is always restricted to being in front of your television or in your living room. It's not in the largest, most convenient room of your home. It's not like some days you can use it in your living room and some days your kitchen and some days your bedroom. But let's not take away from the real advantages here, as I said, of the convenience of standalone with the graphical fidelity of PC.
When you say convenience of standalone, do you mean in regards to the tracking?
The friction, yeah, the fact that you just plug this thing in, there's no messing around with installing things, there's no playing with Steam VR, there's no fighting the fact that you're using a headset from one company with a store from another, with a game that maybe wasn't designed for your exact headset. Every game that you run on this was designed to run on this, and not just on the headset, but on the exact computing hardware you have. And one of our commenters here, Quentin, said, I've always been surprised no one has put out a VR box, just a mini computer to offload the processing so you can bring higher end to most people. But that basically is what this is. The problem is that when you develop something like that, you basically come up with a PlayStation. That is what it is, a processing box for a headset like this. Or you would come up with what is basically a lockdown PC. And then at that point, it might as well just be a pre sold PC.
Yeah, and I saw the question out there. Do you think we'll see PlayStation VR games coming out on PC VR?
Yeah, I do think we'll see the ones from third party publishers. If a publisher says, okay, there's enough people with this headset that we can build a game for it, then it's going to make sense for them to also sell that on Steam, because why wouldn't you if there's going to be more people that are going to buy it? As to whether we'll see Sony exclusives also come to PC VR, I really doubt that. It's theoretically possible, but it doesn't seem like it'll be worth Sony's time given the size of that market. Yes, Sony sells their standard PlayStation games on Steam, which I'm sure a lot of people are going to point out, but that's to a much larger addressable market. The amount of PC VR owners is not big enough, in my opinion, to justify that for Sony.
There is the flip side of that, of just Half-Life Alex and all the people out there crossing their fingers that Valve and Sony are going to make that happen. And I wonder when is the correct time for Sony to reveal that, if they've actually made that deal with Valve, right? You would want to get in front of some of the purchases being made for your competing headsets. And I guess if we've really got Quest 3 getting lined up to come up early next year, that might end up being the lineup time of when you kind of come out and say that's coming. But obviously, it's still an unknown. It's just there's a lot of people that would probably be sold on a PSVR just on that title alone. I don't know if it's going to be millions, but there will be a lot of people who want that game desperately and don't have the money for a PC to get it on. So we'll see what happens there. Any comments you want to respond to?
No comments. I was just going to say that that really will, as always, be the main decider when buying a headset like this. It's not about, for most people, the hardware. It's never for the people that watch our show. For me personally, it's all about the hardware. But for the majority of people, they buy a Quest 2 because they want to play a particular game or set of games that are available on Quest 2. It'll be the same for PlayStation VR 2. People will buy or not buy this based on the games that are available. And Sony has made some big promises about having 20 plus titles available, and that's going to really be what matters. Not only what does Sony bring out in that launch period, that initial launch period, but what will be released for this headset in Christmas 2023, and what will come out for it in 2024. Can Sony commit to fund the kinds of games that will bring people into VR? I suspect yes, but we'll have to see.
Yeah, I'm seeing the comments all over the board talking about Sony's the excitement for Sony's upcoming headset, as well as just ripping apart PSVR one. Even some people who love PSVR one. You know, For most people, you buy one headset and you live with it and you start defending it because that's your headset. I get it. And when you own these devices and let them sort of live on your face for a while, it makes sense to kind of like come around to this place of appreciating what it's able to bring you. But I am one of those people that just felt absolutely destroyed every time I used a PSVR 1 because I hated that I couldn't turn around without my hands disappearing. Meanwhile, every other headset I was using, I had the Vive Pre, and I was using full room scale, and to feel that constricted in every single app you use, you never kind of forget it. It's gonna be such a big eye opener for a lot of PSVR 1 owners to move up to this.
Oh, this is going to be a night and day generational jump. The original PlayStation VR was a headset designed in 2014, being tracked by a camera released in 2013, using controllers released in 2010. It is a decade old in comparison to this. This is going to be, I feel, sort of really excited for the people who are going to go from original PlayStation VR to this, because they're going to see all of the advancements that have happened in the past decade of VR, be it inside out tracking, be it the higher resolution screens, be it the better lenses, be it the eye tracking, be it the, controllers that are ergonomic with thumbsticks and haptics. It's going to be great if you're going to be one of those people.
Let's move on to this next subject about Lenovo's ThinkReality VRX mixed reality headset. Lenovo, of course, has been in VR for a long time, but I wouldn't say its products had a very long shelf life. Heaney, why don't you walk us through what this product is and some of the context there?
Yeah, so Lenovo's history, as you say, in VR is big, but it hasn't really been incredibly impactful. It worked with Google on the Mirage Solo, which came out in 2018, the same year as Oculus Go. And it was actually the first standalone headset outside of China with positional tracking. So instead of just rotating your head, you could actually lean around and even walk around the room. And, they beat Quest at that. That came out a year before Quest. The problem, of course, was that it didn't have those positionally tracked controllers that really made Quest magical and made it kind of take off. And so the Oculus Go at half the price completely destroyed it in the market. Lenovo obviously also worked before that with Microsoft on the Explorer, the Windows MR headset. But for the obvious reasons that Microsoft didn't back that with content and that those were made to be as cheap as physically possible, yes, it sold some units, but it never really, Windows Mixed Reality never really took a large market share on the Steam VR hardware survey. Then the past few years, Lenovo's actually been very successful in making headsets for education. They basically make a 4K Oculus Go called VR Classroom that is being used, but I think it's the most popular headset in education whatsoever. But that's something you obviously don't hear about in the consumer space. Recently, we obviously did see a poster come out from China showing some sort of Lenovo Legion standalone gaming headset, but there is absolutely no indication of that thing coming to the West. We reached out to our Western Lenovo contact and they didn't even seem to know what we were talking about. So I think that kind of answers that question. But this is Think Reality VRX. And just before anyone gets kind of too excited, this is a headset for businesses. It like Pico and like the upcoming Quest Pro, it uses pancake lenses for a thinner and lighter visor. Like those headsets, it has color pass through, stereo color pass through with two cameras, and it has the battery in the back. Lenovo's pitch here is that it comes preloaded with all of the software businesses need, everything about it from the user experience to the way that you can manage it is designed for businesses, but it does seem like it's coming into quite a crowded space. You've got Vive Focus 3 if a business doesn't need the mixed reality aspect, if it's just for VR. You've got Quest Pro coming up if a business does need the mixed reality color pass through. And then you've got Pico, obviously Pico 4 and Pico 4 Enterprise. Although I would note that while this has stereo pass through, we do not yet know whether Pico's pass through is stereo. We will have a review of Pico relatively shortly to reveal that. But until we know that, I can't say whether it's a real contender to this.
Yeah, a lot of things to consider there, and I'm seeing people talk about a lot of our different subjects that we've been getting into today. One of the questions was, where can I buy the D-Link AirBridge? There's a link to that right on the UploadVR. If you go to the uploadvr.com homepage, if you're if you're watching this live, we have a story right there about the D-Link. You go in there, it's like the second link or first link in the story. So if you want to go check that out, it's there. But like we said, we'd recommend waiting until we get actually hands-on experience with it and can compare that to some of the other solutions out there. And I'm seeing people talk about Lenovo killing or Google killing the Mirage Solo almost before it was out of the crib, so to speak. So like, uh, I remember getting, emailing back with Google to find there was a secret menu in the system so you could unlock their little room scale uh, d restriction they had on it. Basically, the original Mirage Solo, you could only lean around a little bit, and you couldn't actually walk around a whole space, like, they hadn't built the software for measuring out a whole space, but you could access a secret developer menu and then do that, and I was able to test it outside, walking around, the whole of their home space, with quite a lot of freedom and emailing back and forth with them and finding out, yeah, you could actually put this faceplate. They were sending out this faceplate to developers to put on the device and then track 2 controllers. And they had everything, the whole package there long before Meta got there, and they just canned the whole thing and moved right on. And here we are all these years later, and they've killed Stadia, again. People are talking about this whole, just why can't Google do this right? Why does Google kill everything just a few years into it? And I know there's that theory about how the good engineers move on and they just leave these products languishing. I don't know. It's just tragic to think that we had this product. It's one of those ultimate stories that if there's anybody out there with connections at Google, you come into my DMs and tell me what happened because this it's one of those ultimate stories of just who was the decision maker that said, "Ah, I don't wanna do it. We're gone," because they could have had tens of millions of these devices out there before Meta got there, and they could have pushed through, I think, in a very serious way.
Yeah, we
Are
could
they
have
gonna
had a
come back to
market.
it?
Yeah, we could have had a market where there was competition much earlier than there is now. Because one of the most significant parts of the Pico launch and why we're talking about it so much is because it finally does bring competition against Meta. And Google and Lenovo were completely positioned to actually drive that. But there are some interesting parallels to HTC here in that just like HTC, Lenovo has pivoted out of the consumer VR market out into the enterprise market. And Quentin in our comments asks, how large is the enterprise VR market? It seems like everyone wants to get a piece of it. And that is because it is actually not just large, but it's growing very, very rapidly because VR has so many use cases in business that if you're just a gamer in VR or a consumer that uses it for something like social VR, you may not even be aware of. The three main areas are training, visualization, and collaboration. Training is obvious. You can put someone into a scenario that virtually, rather than having to spend all the money to kind of orchestrate that out in the real world. That means you can train more employees, you can train them faster, you can kind of weed out people before you spend money on putting them into real life situations. Visualization is completely obvious. If you're an engineering firm, if you're an architecture firm, rather than having to view your creation before it's made on a little rectangle in front of you, you can stand in front of it in real scale. If it's a part for a car engine or an entire skyscraper, you can physically see it in 3D in front of you. And then collaboration is obvious. That's the kind of virtual meetings or even designing these engineering or architecture projects collaboratively in real time multiplayer. These kind of use cases are only going to get bigger and bigger as these headsets get higher resolution and lighter, and the controllers and the tracking gets better, and there's mixed reality, so you can stand in the same room. And that's why you see all of these companies rushing into this market. That's why you see Pico, even with its huge normal consumer focus, wanting an enterprise. That's presumably, though we don't know yet, one of the reasons that Meta is working on Quest Pro. It is going to be a really big market.
I'm just gonna have to bring it up because I've seen a couple different comments on it about Pimax. So Pimax supposedly just announced some news on their sort of channels. Heaney, could you sum up for our audience sort of how we view Pimax and kind of like the concerns we have for our audience when it comes to their products?
Yeah, so we're obviously we If Pimax's claims about their upcoming standalone headsets are true, those are going to be some remarkable products with some remarkable specs. But as anyone who's been following that company for years will know, it often fails to deliver on what it's promised, or at the very least, it delivers years and years late. So we're not going to cover the news of the production until we know it really, really is in production or until it's actually shipping. Because there's been times in the past where Pimax has talked about something being in production years before it ever really shipped to consumers. Though, if they are able to pull off the specs that they are claiming and they are really able to ship that, we will happily be reviewing it and bringing you our thoughts.
Yeah, Pimax, Onakazi saying Pimax makes neat and interesting noise. However, I will wait until an actual release. And that is our kind of view on it as journalists, where we really have to verify with our own eyes those products and how they perform for us, and then we can kind of assess in that context of seeing it for ourselves, what is the general situation facing consumers who are interested in interacting with that company, right? We've heard a lot of troubling stories when it comes to things like product support and that sort of thing, and all of that has to be packaged with actually putting our eyes up to the device. So we will get to it when we get to it. Timex usually has a presence at CES in January, so if they're there and we're there, we will try to get our eyes on it there. We'll try to get our eyes on it earlier, but again, it's one of those things where we've got to take a very cautious approach to that coverage. Any comments you want to respond to?
I think, yeah, you've brought up the comments we're looking for. I think we can move on to our final topic, that big Quest 3 leak.
Yeah, I'm not seeing. Sadly, it's Bradley in our comments today. Do I have been really enjoying it when our commenters have signed off with where in the world they are. So let us know what countries we've got tuned into our show today. Yeah, the apparent leak of Quest 3's design and key features. I am very suspicious of this, Heaney, because yeah, this is coming from sources that have been confirmed in the past, right? So this is coming to via a route where previous information has been confirmed. So there's a high likelihood that this is legitimate. But isn't it possible, Heaney, that Meta is still considering multiple designs for its upcoming devices?
Yeah, we do know that each time Meta has released a product after Quest, be it Quest 2, that there has been a consideration of different models. But if this is something that is launching next year, as the information's report suggested earlier this year, then it probably is going to be far long enough that at least the basic design and feature set is locked in. Maybe they're going to be modifications, maybe they're going to be testing, but as you pointed out there, sadly, it's Brad Lynch that these CAD images were leaked to. Also received CAD images earlier this year of Quest Pro, and from that leak earlier with the hotel worker that found a Quest Pro engineering sample, that was pretty much verified to be absolutely correct. Everything seen in the Quest Pro CAD images were also seen in that Quest Pro leak. So this does seem to me to be true. And if anyone didn't spot this, if anyone hasn't sort of caught up on what's happened here, this is reportedly, apparently, the design and schematics for Quest 3. It shows a headset that has pancake lenses that are they look essentially identical to Quest Pros. In fact, I would go as far as to say as they probably are identical to Quest Pros. They are the exact same shape and configuration, but it doesn't seem to have eye tracking or face tracking. Instead, what Meta seems to have done here is to have prioritized bringing in the mixed reality features that are coming to Quest Pro to Quest 3. So in the front, you see cameras that are more optimized for color pass through and a depth sensor for potential future capability of scanning in the geometry of your room and giving you really, really high quality hand tracking. So that's actually a big surprise because Mark Zuckerberg had spoken in multiple interviews about wanting to prioritize face and eye tracking as the next feature set for the next Quest. And assuming he didn't misspeak, This does suggest that Meta is now more interested in shipping a headset that is just as much a virtual reality headset as it is a mixed reality headset, rather than trying to push that VR specific face and eye tracking for now. If this is true, what we will see here, if this releases at anywhere near the same price as Quest 2, is a low cost, accessible mixed reality headset that is also virtual reality. And a lot of people have speculated that the reason behind this may be the reports that Apple is planning to release its own mixed reality headset next year for something like, close to 10 times the price of what we'd expect a Quest 3 to be.
Yeah, so it's surprising, uh, but I think it makes sense. I think it's the right call ultimately. The problem I have in my head there, Heaney, is you've got this high-end device, Quest Pro, with those features, and now we've got this indication that the low-end mass market device is going to come without some of those key features. So now you've got what's essentially going to happen is people going and getting a high-end device in Quest Pro, but potentially working for years on software that might, it doesn't necessarily a future for it isn't necessarily confirmed, I guess. We know that Meta is very deeply invested in this idea that face and eye tracking and social presence is so key to the future, but weight and slimness are going to be and cost are going to be major factors pushing back against those things making it into consumer hardware. So like are developers who go and get a Quest Pro and invest in software that uses that face and eye tracking, are they going to be sort of, not investing their time smartly if they spend too much time on those features? Or are they just getting ahead of the curve? It's gonna be a really tough choice for those people, I think.
Well, if they're designing for enterprise, for businesses, for the key use case that seemed to be for face and eye tracking, virtual meetings where instead of having to fly everyone over to a certain location or have everyone in the office every day of the week, you can just have people don these thin and light headsets and be in a virtual meeting space together. That'll be smart for developers to invest in. For consumer apps, if you're making a game, you're right. Then it's not going to make much sense to focus on face and eye tracking if you are not going to see that arrive in the consumer devices that people can actually afford and buy. But you know, the rumors are for Quest Pro to have a price somewhere between 1 and 2,000. Meta has confirmed that it's significantly higher than $800. So they had to choose, what do they put in the lower cost $400 headset? Do they bring face and eye tracking but miss out on mixed reality, or do they bring mixed reality? Because say they had chosen face and eye tracking instead of mixed reality, that would mean that any developer who's building a mixed reality experience on Quest Pro is wasting their time, at least within the Meta ecosystem, because there's not going to be, until future iterations of this thing, a headset to run it on. When you think of the kind of content from a user based perspective, it does make more sense, as you say, to stick with mixed reality. One thing I'd point out is that we haven't even mentioned yet, arguably the key spec improvement of Quest 3, according to this leak, and something that a lot of people I noticed when they were discussing this completely missed. And that's that uh, Bradley, sadly, it's Bradley on YouTube, says that the source that provided him this, or one of the sources, says that this headset will use the XR2 Generation 2, the first new chip in a standalone headset, completely new chip that we've seen since the release of Quest 2. If that's true, there have been two full generations of Snapdragon chips since the Snapdragon 865 that the XR2 is based on. So if there's a third generation next year, we're going to be seeing significant performance increases. Just as from Quest 1 to Quest 2, there was an almost 2x leap in performance, there is every possibility that with the XR2 Gen 2 and a Quest 3, we see that same kind of performance leap. And, the mixed reality is cool for that. The pancake lenses give you a slimmer, lighter headset, but fundamentally, what enables the VR experience to have a higher fidelity, to have larger games, to have more complex interactions, to have more physics and more AI is that chip. It is the primary limiting factor for standalone headsets. And if Quest 3 can introduce a newer, much more powerful chip. That's going to be the most meaningful improvement of all.
Guy making the comment that the fact that it has a battery in the front and a soft strap is very disappointing when you consider that Pico 4 is releasing this month and has a lot of comfort balance compared to that. It is a very shrewd, tough choice on Meta's part, how to approach the strap situation, because it lets you ship an altogether cheaper device at the outset, but lots of people complaining about that comfort. I'm using the hard strap add-on. I can't stand the soft strap on the Quest, and that's the experience for a lot of people. But of course, right, you've got a lot of accessories you can go and add on to this to improve the experience in multiple ways. And of course, if they're using the pancake lenses, the front of this device will be a lot smaller. So it'll be a step forward significantly. The thing that I guess I'm stuck on, Heaney, is hand tracking and hand tracking as input. It doesn't make sense for Meta to ship a Quest without hand controllers yet. It's going to take every Quest app is compatible with hand controllers. They are building out that library, and it's almost to the point of like, can they really use the Quest brand without hand controllers bundled with every device sold? Like how inextricably linked are those two things? But we know that moving forward, if they're going to attach more sensors to this device, and it's got better hand tracking, it is a route for them to get to eventually. And then you're talking devices that cost only a couple $100s, and you're talking true mass market VR for the first time really in memory, right? We talk about Quest 2 getting to mass market at $300, but the extra controllers, that's extra things a lot of people have to learn. Being able to do yoga or, sort of like solitary exercises where you're not actually doing any resistance weight, you could still get a lot of exercises just looking in a mirror or following the instructions of someone. They can still hit a lot of those use cases that Quest currently hits, but they can't bring over that library really effectively on hand tracking alone. Uh, I don't know. Well, I say that, but if the hand tracking is really dramatically improved, Heaney, do you think there's some games that would be able to make the jump to hand tracking only without controllers?
Yeah, we'll need to see. So it looks like, as we showed in the previous slide from Bradley, that this uses a very similar, if not identical, depth sensor setup to Quest Pro. So we'll need to look very closely when we get Quest Pro at what kind of quality that hand tracking is. If it is good enough and Meta starts to push more and more developers to integrate hands over time through Quest Pro, then maybe you do see, if not in Quest 3, but maybe by Quest 4, a option sold without controllers. And to be clear, when we say that, we don't mean that it doesn't offer controllers at all. We mean that there's two boxes. One box costs $100 less and doesn't have the controllers, and all the marketing on it is for the games and apps that don't have controllers. And another box has them for $100 more, and the marketing for it is all of those more immersive games. And obviously, then at any time, anyone who buys the first box can just buy those two controllers. It does come down to the content ecosystem, as you say. Over time, there are more and more apps supporting hand tracking, but it's still not good enough yet to be used in many games, and it's still not to the point where there's an incentive. Strangely, though, if there was a headset from Meta or another company sold for $100 less without the controllers, that would itself create the incentive for developers to come in and start building that content. The one thing, by the way, I would note, I completely agree that this soft strap is not good enough on Quest 2. I think it's absolutely essential that you get an Elite strap, which is a real shame. You shouldn't have to buy an aftermarket product. Hopefully, this being thinner and lighter with the pancake lenses makes that not the case. But the one saving grace here is that if this is the same strap design as Quest 2, you could probably, and hopefully, and maybe this is the intention of Meta, use the exact same accessories that you have for Quest 2. So you have your own uh, custom head strap that you bought from a company, you have those maybe Logitech headphones. You just take the Quest 2 visor off and put them straight back on. You're muted.
Isn't that the power cord? Isn't that where the power goes? And that's covered up by the straps, isn't it? When you attach them to the side?
I mean, we don't know if that's the power cord. That could just be the design for the clip. I'm not 100% sure that is the But maybe it is, but it does look to me that that's remarkably similar to the Quest 2, and it would seem like a missed opportunity if you couldn't, because it seems like it would be so simple to have the same straps clip on. Because I mean, obviously, this strap is still going to be able to clip off. It's not going to be like they're going to.
Guy's agreeing with me, and yeah, he doesn't have any perspective there to agree with me. So I'll take his backing as a big pushback against Heaney. The one thing I guess I'm going to comment on here is if this is looking, like I said, like the smart trade-offs, right, to make in this next generation device. But again, it's still unclear to me how they extend to hand tracking. But how many hundreds of dollars can they really get it to, right? Like still have this comment from Carmack in the back of my mind. So John Carmack, the consulting officer, he's consulted technically for Oculus and then Facebook and now Meta, and he usually speaks pretty plainly, or as plainly as he figures is not going to hurt people on his team. But like he made this comment about the price increase going from $300 to $400 as a weird framing. He called the way Meta phrased it as weird. And one of the things we've talked about, Heaney, is uh, was one of the reasons they did that, moving it from $300 to $400 to align with what this future device is going to be priced. So, like, are we talking a $400 device with controllers and then a $300 device without? And then are you talking about a $400 up device when you start adding all the cool accessories to get your experience exactly the way you want it? So we know Quest Pro has those self-tracked controllers. We'll be wondering if those are in the box here or if they've got a separate set of controllers you get here initially. And then you've got all those accessories, like the strap, protects, potentially an extra battery. We've got the AirBridge dongle that's going to bring over PCVR. You could have a whole constellation of cool accessories to add on to this device. But I still wonder, like, I'm going to go out there on a limb and say I think Quest Go makes so much sense for them to name a Quest without the hand controllers. It's the name is already ready for them to use.
Sure, but you wouldn't want to have a completely different headset for that. And I think people would probably, they would think this isn't a Quest 3, it's a different headset. I don't think we're going to see the content ecosystem get to the point that it's viable to ship this without controllers by Quest 3. The anticipation is that this thing would come out in 12 months or something like that. Not There's not enough time for developers to build enough content. But could this set the foundation for a device that has good enough hand tracking that developers build the kind of content so that when it comes around to Quest 4 or Quest 5, they can do that? It does seem like that is an eventual inevitability.
Bradley making the joke that you can upgrade the Quest 2 straps by grabbing a motorized drill. I like that to
Yeah.
make a hole for the power cord. But we'll see if that is actually a power cord or just the old Oculus symbol coming through. And obviously, Guy Godin making the comment that the accessories are overpriced, and I think that's fair too. We've seen very inexpensive accessories from third-party makers. If they're going to kind of subsidize the hardware, it makes sense to get the headset out to as many people as possible. But it also, I think, that's come with the fact that they're trying to make the money back on the accessories, which is kind of a bummer. But it's
Yeah.
I can't say that they're high quality because so many of the head straps did break. There's that issue too.
Yeah, the original Elite straps definitely. I think everyone that had one had it break eventually if you were enough of a VR user. To come back on the idea of will this have standard Quest 2 style controllers, or will it have those self-tracking controllers that it looks like Quest Pro is going to have? I would say that it's extremely unlikely that you could put self-track controllers into a $400 product that has the headset as well. It looks like those are going to cost a lot more than just flashing some IR LEDs in a tracking ring, and it'll take some sort of significant advancement in the cost of that, be it a custom chip or something else from Qualcomm over time to make that possible in a product like this?
UV Wrapped has this comment that actually does solve the issue that we've been talking about here, Heaney, where just throwing out the name MetaGo, right? You toss the Quest out of there, you reuse the Go name from the original, and then you toss the association with the Quest ecosystem, so you don't confuse all those buyers who are expecting get a game system and they got a portable social device. That
But
actually makes a
is
lot of
this a different
sense.
headset? Is it a
No,
different headset, or is it just a
you could
Quest?
still do this and then
So
upgrade
it's
it
a
to a Quest with the
so
controllers.
it's a Quest 3 sold as MetaGo.
No, what it's suggesting is that you could sell a controllerless version of this device as a MetaGo, and with a library that only fits hand tracking specific games, and then go and buy controllers separate to that, and it basically that's upgrading you to a Quest with the same exact device. It
Personally,
makes
I think that
sense
would be
from a
more
branding
confusing.
perspective in my head, at least. But
I think that
well,
would be more confusing to buyers than, because then you'd be like, are these two different headsets? Am I using the MetaQuest app to access the MetaQuest store and the MetaQuest browser on a MetaGo?
yeah, I suppose it's Quest all the way across, given the app's
Yeah,
naming, isn't it? Ugh. Oh,
and the branding.
well. Yep, makes sense.
I don't see why
Yeah.
it can't just be, you understand that you need a controller for some apps and you don't for other apps, and like, I don't understand why that's so confusing in itself, that people will understand that you need a physical controller if that's what's required and if it's sold separately. And especially if there's two boxes, one that's sold with it and one that's sold without. Just like some people buy a tablet without a keyboard and some people buy a tablet with a keyboard.
Yeah, and PW Hazard's making the comment, "Lol, I can't imagine they reuse the Go brand." Yeah, I'm with you there. I did not like the Go headset. I was so excited for it before it came out, and then I used it and hated myself for using it. Even though I get it, it makes sense, and that's the soft strap here is in many ways like a holdover from that original device because it lets you go lay down, look at the ceiling, and watch a nice big screen in a reclined position. And I'm sure that's a major use case for virtual desktop too on a lot
Yeah.
of devices.
In fairness, it's not just for lying down. If you're on a standard PC chair, a desk chair, and you lean back, if you're using something like a Pico or the Quest with an Elite strap, that's not particularly comfortable because there is this kind of big brick behind your head. The advantage of a soft strap is for seated situations of all sorts, it's more comfortable. But obviously, there's a significant disadvantage in that there's no counterbalance for your head. Ideally, over time, if headsets can eventually become as slim and light as ski goggles, you're not going to want a thick strap at the back. You're going to want a soft strap. The question is just when the headsets get light enough for this to be possible. And yes, the Fresnel lenses, or so the pancake lenses, mean that this can be slimmer and lighter. But the fact that this battery isn't in the strap means that the battery is also in the headset, which means this is very likely the visor heavier than Pico 4.
Mm, lots of interesting things to consider. I am anxiously awaiting all of our hands-on time with Pico 4 and as soon as we can get our hands on all the hardware coming, it's going to help us frame our understanding of what these things are good at. Pico is such a new like they've been working at it for so long, so they've got the experience, but can they pull off a hardware experience that doesn't have massive drawbacks that are just not immediately visible? Like you've got to live with these things for hours before you really understand that, things like the strap necessarily aren't going to work for multi-hour sessions. Um, any other comments you want to respond to before we move towards the end of the show here? Thank you all for the amazing comments. I missed off calling out all the countries, but I saw Sweden and like Belgium, a lot of a lot of global viewers out there. It's always cool to see.
Mr. Lord Beavis here saying that the cloth strap is horrible. It gave me a consistent headache and smashed the Quest 2 onto my face. I completely agree with you there. It really is horrible and it's not good enough for Quest 2. But Quest 2's visor is 470 grams. Pico 4's visor is 290 grams, albeit that is because the battery is in the back. What I do wonder is if you have a headset that's maybe something like 320 grams, what does that feel like with a soft strap? probably still not comfortable. So I do agree with your sentiment there.
Yeah, I liked the comment here from Quentin. I don't understand why people are considering buying the Quest Pro. Most of the features aren't going to benefit the average Quest user. It makes more sense to me to wait for Quest 3. I think that is going to be the chorus, and I think it's going to be kind of weird, when people look at the price. Like, Meta has come out and said this thing is significantly more than $800. They're on the record basically telling everyone out there this thing is going to be out of your price range, but still people are going to be like, oh my gosh, that's so expensive. Did they drop the ball? I'm getting a Pico. Like, there's just going to be so many people saying that as soon as all of that is confirmed. But, I do wonder, we know Meta has said that the headset is coming out in October. We have every expectation we're going to get all of the details there at Oculus Connect, Meta Connect next week. Uh, but the real question of the hour is going to be, are they going to tease Quest 3 at the same time that they start shipping Quest Pro? Because it seems like it would be a massive win for them to make sure that they're like, let the gamers know that they're not being forgotten. They've got a great device to go and get this year, with whatever software they're actually able to ship on that device this year, and then next year, they're going to come out swinging with even more.
Sure, but you would have the counterbalance of the Osborne effect. And the Osborne effect is where if a company announces their next product, no one buys their current product because why would you buy something that's going to be outdated? Yes, you have this leak, and everyone here who follows VR closely knows about this, but the wider market will not look into the details of a computer aided design leak like this. The average gamer that's thinking about buying a headset won't know that there is a Quest 3 presumably coming next year.
I'd agree with that, Heaney, but I do think it's time. We've talked about it time and again that Meta has left consumers behind again and again. That was even one of your headlines, I think, directly said that. Uh, Time is right for them to roll out a payment plan, or even a buyback program where you invest in their ecosystem now, you can upgrade later for less. It makes a lot of sense to kind of lock in people over the long term in that way. Not saying it's a good idea for consumer choice, but I'm saying it's a very smart idea for them if they can start moving that process along, like the way Pico just did with Pico 3 to Pico 4, right?
Yeah, but I think one of the issues that in the way that Meta leaves consumers behind, and one of the arguments I made in that editorial is that they were releasing headsets so quickly that by the time you'd bought something, there was a new one coming out, and then your current support was dropped. The advantage of Meta presumably waiting a year from now for Quest 3, meaning that there's a full 3-year cycle from Quest 2 to Quest 3, is that the people who bought Quest 2 then have this feeling that they weren't left behind, that there was enough time for their device on the market, that it was supported as software. And then potential Quest 3 buyers can come along and say, okay, the last one was on the market for 3 years, so I have confidence that this one is going to be out for a while. The disadvantage of Pico's approach, the advantage obviously is that you get the latest cutting edge hardware as soon as it's available. Pico is, right now at least on a yearly release cycle, less than a year when it comes to actually bringing it out to consumers. But there's going to be that one kind of doubt in some buyers' minds of, is there going to be a Pico 5 next year? Is the new chip that's coming to this Quest 3 also coming to a Pico 5? And if I buy a Pico 4, how soon will it be until it's completely outdated? And so there are big disadvantages and advantages to both of those approaches.
Yeah, it's also one of the reasons why the naming scheme makes sense. We've argued whether why wouldn't you just drop the name after a while, or drop the number and just call it the Quest? But I still wonder about that upgrade scheme of, right. Are you getting the Quest 2 or the Quest 3? Does it make sense to have both of those on the market at the same time? Can you go get a a refurbished Quest 2 and get a super low price on that device? I'm loving the comments from James O'Laughlin and a couple others making jokes about Jurassic Park. You're speaking right to me. We'll have a coupon day, uh, which is a direct quote from Jurassic Park. I love that.
Snafu's pointing out Pico's discount on the next gen for early adopters. Yeah, if you bought a Pico Neo 3 link, they pointed out that you got a 35% discount on Pico 4. They didn't say that about Pico 4, though. That's not something that comes from Pico 4 to Pico 5. And it sounds like that was a one time only thing because of Pico 3 Link being a beta program. So, yes, they did that then, but that's no guarantee it's going to happen next time.
Yeah, very interesting discussion. We appreciate all of your comments. Any final ones you want to talk about there, Heaney?
Just having a look through now at everyone's comments, some seriously high quality of discussion here, as usual. I think we have some of the highest quality discussion of any streams I watch, at least. Uh, Onakazi's asking what large company has done the kind of program you're talking about, and I think the answer would be Apple. Yeah, presumably you kind of Apple gave you a subscription where when the new iPhone comes out, you get a new one. Uh, it seems like it would make sense for VR headsets, but probably it's one of those things that will come when the market gets larger and it's justified.
Well, I just the only reason I kind of pressure it as a thing that could happen now is the pressure that Meta is under in standalone that they haven't seen before, right? They can't they can't take their time getting these programs up and running until the market is ready for them. But they've also got just that situation where they have been subsidizing their products. They're taking a huge loss. That's the other thing. Going back to that comment from John Carmack, where they increased the price up to $400. Is it now no longer so subsidized? Guy making the comment, Pico is also expected to make hardware updates every year, according to their Chinese marketing banners. And yeah, Brad is teasing in the comments here the indication that we are likely to see those constant updates from Pico. I mean, keep in mind, Pico did effectively release 2 headsets in 1 year here, or even 3 headsets when you consider the Pro and the 4. So they are moving at a Samsung pace of releases.
And yeah, and that works well in the smartphone era where, a lot of people are using this as their primary computing device and they're using it 8 or 10 hours a day and it makes sense. And majority of people are paying already on a subscription plan that includes their data. But there's a reason that consoles don't do that. There's a reason that PlayStation and Xbox have much longer iteration cycles than that. And it is because of that effect where consumers never want to jump in because they're always worried that there's going to be a next thing. And that's I really wonder how that's going to work out in the VR market because if Pico is releasing every year, I don't think a lot of Western consumers are going to really appreciate that, especially when it comes to something like games where the potentially say the Pico 5 can play games that the Pico 4 can't. Are you going to really be happy with a headset that you bought 12 months ago that can't play a new game coming out? Meta made that mistake themselves, to be clear, with Quest 1. Quest 2 came out within 18 months of Quest 1, and very soon you had all of these games that couldn't run on the Quest 1. And I wonder if Meta is trying to avoid doing that again. I wonder if they're trying to keep the Quest 2 on the market for long enough that people aren't going to worry about that in the longer term. And if that matters more to gaining a larger market of tens and then hundreds of millions of people than it does in the short term competition against Pico.
Let's talk about next week, Heaney. We've got obviously Oculus Connect or Meta Connect coming up on October 11th. Do you think we'll be in this studio maybe a couple hours after that show ends? Or how do you think we're going to do this? Because I would love to give our audience some expectations for when we're going to be back in here, because it's going to be a huge event to digest, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I think like most years, it depends basically how much news is there. We're obviously going to prioritize getting the articles about the news written. We're going to prioritize giving you a highlight reel of what Connect has. But as soon as we are able to get all those sort of tasks done, we'll definitely be coming in here to have a more in depth discussion, be it on the day of Connect or the day after.
Yeah, so it is. We have every expectation is going to be a massive, massive news week, and we will plan to be on top of it all. So we encourage you to come to uploadvr.com for all of the latest as we get into just what's going to be a phenomenally big period of news. I noticed there was a comment a while back that just popped into my head talking about people waiting for Valve to release its product. I look at this and I think it looks close to what I would love to see out of a Valve mixed reality headset. But there was also the joke in the comments that just like their games, we won't get a third headset out of Valve. That's a very cruel comment, but we hope is not the case. But I do think we could see it in the next year, if Meta's really gonna push, a Quest 3 out this soon, we could have, Valve there to meet them. We should have Backseat VR developer tomorrow, and, yeah, like I said, please like, comment, subscribe, share our link out, support our work. Please become members and support us directly in our journalism work here to chronicle the next moves in personal computing. Heaney and I, we really do believe very long term about this technology, that it is going to fundamentally reshape the way we communicate and do our computing in the future. And we'd love to have your support as we reach out and work with sources out there to make sure everyone is prepared for this, everything that's coming. So thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you in the future.
Thanks, everyone. We hope to see you next week.